Right. So we're talking about the going out of Egypt. The Jewish people left Egypt, and thank God my voice is better. This is amazing. This is incredible. I don't really know how it's going to be until I start talking in the morning, and every day it's a surprise. But today is a pleasant surprise. It seems that everything is working, all the vocal cords and everything. Okay. So we talked about this first chapter in the second book of the Torah, Exodus. And in Hebrew, it's called Shmot Names. And it puts a special stress on the names of the Jewish people as they came into Israel, and it came into Egypt. And it says that these names also represent how they were going to go out of Egypt. That they came, the same names that they came in to Egypt with, were the same names they came out of Egypt with. So a person can ask, okay, very nice. What when they left Egypt, 3,300 and 34 years ago, they left Egypt. In a couple of months, it'll be 34. So they left Egypt a long time ago. It's a nice historical thing, but let bygones be bygones. What do we care what happened? The main thing is the future, the present. So the Rebbe says that's the whole point of the Torah. The point of the Torah is to teach you what we have to do to make the present meaningful and the future into redemption, miraculous. And it's all in our hands. That's the whole idea of the creation. The whole idea of the creation is that we not pay attention to the bad things in the world to the degree that they affect us. Exactly the opposite. We're supposed to affect them. We are supposed to take the Mitzrayim, the Egypt of this world. This whole world is like one big Egypt. It's one big, how do you want to call it, a prison. And to take the prison and the illusion of this world and to transform it, because this world is the goal. This world is very precious. It's very, very important to God. Not just as an obstacle course that if we go through it, we pass, we go to heaven. But exactly the opposite. We show that this world is much, much infinitely higher than heaven, than the highest heavens, because heavens are just rays of godliness, spiritual aspects of godliness. But this world is the essence of God is expressed here in this physical world when we use the world the way God wants. And that's the idea of the Jews coming into Egypt, means like the soul coming into the body, and also the Jews coming into this terrible exile. The Jews were in Israel for like almost 1,000 years, or more than 1,000. I'm sorry, like 1,300 years. They were in Israel, and they had temples, 2 temples, and they had this, and they did not. I'd say they did not exactly comply with God's plans. God had a plan that the Jews would really get it right, and they would make this world into a beautiful, holy, perfect place. And they didn't. The world instead affected them, because the world is not just outside of us, the world is also inside of us. We're part of the world also. Everybody has what's called a natural soul, and natural impulses and natural urges and values and ideas and feelings and goals, and all these are not determined by what God wants us to do in the world. The Rebbe once gave the example of sending an astronaut. Right, there's like an international project to send the first astronaut to, into outer space to do something, to conquer Mars or something. The Rebbe didn't give example what it was. And hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent, trillions of dollars have been spent finding the right person and building the proper instruments and proper rocket ship and etc. Trillions and trillions of dollars. The whole world is watching them. And finally the astronaut gets shot up into heaven. Everybody's clapping. It's succeeding. It's going up, and he gets up there to near to Mars, and they say, "Okay, now do experiment number 1." And the astronaut says, "Jump in the lake." He said, "Excuse me, hello." Are you all right? Or we're still getting some static here. He says, that's no static. I've been taking orders from you guys for 2 years already, telling me what to do, how to move my finger, how to move my toe, what experiments. I'm finished. I'm not taking any more orders. Up to now, it's been you guys have been ruling. Now it's up to me. I'm taking over. Signing off. He turns off the radio, and that's it. Does what he wants. I embellished what the Rebbe said, but the Rebbe said essentially they spend the trillions and trillions of dollars and send this astronaut. He does what he wants. The same thing. God created the whole entire world. That's what the whole Torah tells us. All the spiritual levels, all the physical levels, just to send a man down into this world. That's like the astronaut. And we get down and we say, we're not going to do what you want. Right? No, I'm on my own. I have free will. You gave me free will. I'm doing what I want. So man didn't do what he was supposed to. So says the Rebbe. Now we are getting out of Egypt. That's the whole idea that the Jews went into Egypt and they came out. It's possible to get out. Did you know that? Possible to get out of this selfishness. And it's not through religion. It's not through going to heaven. It's through doing what God wants. You want to call it religion? That's a religion. Doing what God wants. The only time in the history of the world, the only religion that even says that God told a whole entire nation, personally, face to face, not just holy people came up from some mountain or something from the desert and said, I have a message. God personally took all of the Jewish people out of Egypt and personally gave them his Torah. And the Torah is telling us why God creates the world, what he wants from us, and for what he wants from the whole world. But the Jews were chosen to tell everybody this. But the Jews have to go out of Egypt themselves, and that's this whole idea. So in order to go out of Egypt, a person has to have a desire to go out of Egypt, number one. Before that, even before number one, he has to know that he's in Egypt. He has to know that he's in Egypt. And before he can know that he's in Egypt, he has to know what the alternative is. He has to know what he's supposed to be. And then he realizes that he's not there. So where we're supposed to be is we're supposed to be in a world where we express our potential. I think according to science, whatever it is, a person uses 1/100th of his brain or something like that. 100th of his brain or 1/10th of his brain. There's big geniuses that use, like another percent or something. And that's of our brain. How much of our soul do we use? Like 0%. So that's the idea. The Mashiach is going to encourage everyone. That's what Chassidut is, to try, first of all, to tell us what the goal is and where we're supposed to be, and then to tell us how it is that we got so far away from it, and then to tell us how it's possible, how it is possible, and not only just possible, but an obligation for every person to go out of these false limitations and false ideas and to realize how close God is, and for the non-Jews to do the 7 Noahide commandments, for the Jews to do all the 613 commandments, etc. Okay. And the Rebbe explained it in very great length. He said that going out of Egypt, who was the one that stressed going out of Egypt? Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, that he was made the head of the Jewish people. And he said, my whole life, I just wanted that they should say the paragraph of the Shema that talks about going out of Egypt, that they should say that paragraph also in the nighttime. And the rabbis included, so let's also say it in the days of the Mashiach. Because even in the days of the Mashiach, we'll still have to have this movement, this attitude of going out and doing more. Because the days of the Mashiach are not like going to heaven after you die, you just sit there and you receive. We have to be partners with God. And Mashiach is going to make it that we're really going to be partners with God. That's the whole idea. And going to heaven, it's like, you get a pit stop. You get a pit stop, you get a temporary leave of absence, leave, from the army. They would give a person a leave, he'd go. According to everything we said, move on. Now we can understand what it says in the Midrash, Shmot Names. These are the names of the Jewish people that came into Egypt. The Midrash says that this is talking about the Jewish going out of Egypt. The sentence says, these are the names of the Jews when they went into Egypt. And the Midrash says that this is talking about the Jews going out of Egypt. Even though this pastus simply it's talking about going into Egypt. Aboy Mitzrayim. There's Mazkirim Yitzias Mitzrayim. Nevertheless, we remember going out of Egypt in the nighttime. What does that mean? That means that the true idea of the reason why we went into Egypt, why we are in this exile, why the soul is in the body, why is godliness concealed from us and egotism is so revealed to us, why Hayurida B'choshech HaGolus, we have descended into this what's called exile that we're in now, where Jews don't know what Jew is, and nobody knows what God is, and nobody cares what the Torah is. Why are we in this state? Geulas Israel, in order to go out. And going out in this case doesn't mean escaping. It means transforming the whole situation into being one of redemption. Ad lahavi lamos Mashiach, until it brings to the days of the Mashiach. That's the true idea of going out of Egypt. Like we said before. And therefore, Hashem Geulas Israel. Therefore, the going into Egypt, the whole purpose of going into Egypt, it wasn't just a punishment and it wasn't just a temporary state. It was a necessary, how do you say, a necessary attribute that every Jew has to attain of going out of Egypt. If we didn't, when we're in Egypt, we wouldn't have this ability. I heard once that there was a story, I think this was a long time ago, there was a person that was paralyzed from his waist down. And you can find the details anyway. He was paralyzed from his waist down, and he decided it wasn't going to let him get down, so he would drag himself into his, or he would have somebody push him, whatever, into his backyard. And there was a fence around his backyard, so he would pull himself up to this fence, and he would hold on and force himself to stand on his legs until finally he would like drag himself and make himself move until finally he moved a little bit, and then he moved a little bit more, and he moved a little bit more, and he regained senses in his legs. And of course, there was times where he fell back, and there was regressions and things and progressions and regressions until finally he got himself to working, and he moved his legs and he could walk. But suddenly he got this new thing that it was he had a new ability to go out of his limitations. In other words, his goal was to walk, but suddenly he realized that 1 second, now I have a new thing, not just the ability to walk. Anybody can walk, right? So I went from being paralyzed to walking, but all of a sudden he got a new ability, a superpower of going out of limitations. So it's just good, I can walk, but what about this power that I've, this secret gift that I've been given of going out of limitations? Let's use it further. So he started to walk, he started to run, and eventually became like an Olympic runner or something like that. I'm not saying we should be Olympic runners, but on the other hand, we should know that we can go out of our limitations and reveal our true abilities. Our true abilities is not just to walk, it's also to run, to jump, spiritually. But first of all, we have to want to go out of Egypt. But once we get this desire to go out of Egypt, this desire to go out of Egypt, in some ways, is even more valuable than going out of Egypt itself. That's why it says, even in the days of the Mashiach, we'll still remember going out of Egypt. This will make until the Geula Mitit V'Shlema, until the total redemption of the Jewish people. Mostly, if it says the Jewish people are coming to Israel, there were 70. Why were they 70? The number 70, this hints at that boy Mitzrayim into exile between the 70 nations. 70 nations, this is just I don't know, a number, anyway, that's the way it's referred to all the nations of the world. There's places where the 70 nations are listed. Now there's more than 70, I think, more than 70 countries. But if there's more than 70 races, I don't know what they call them, groups, nationalities. Like we have North Korea and South Korea, right? But they're all Koreans. They're the same people. north of this. So the same thing in Africa. They divided up into all these little countries. But there's how many countries are there in Africa? I don't even know. 50, 20. I have to look and see. But I don't imagine there's that many actual nations that they're just divided up. Could be. Okay, let's go. Okay, 70 nations is the number that's given to all of non-Jewish mankind. The Jewish, now we are in what's called exile among the 70 nations, that corresponds to the 70 souls of the Jewish people. This will bring about the redemption of the Jewish people, that the power to that the 70 souls have that came out from Yaakov. That's the 70. It says that into 70 people went into Egypt with Yaakov. Until that Rebbe finally came Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He said, I am 70 years old. Again, the number 70. This gives the power that we can remember going out of Egypt, even in the nighttime. And even including not just the nighttime of exile, but even in the days of the Mashiach, we'll remember this quality of going out of Egypt, and we will embody this and we'll utilize it. Lahasi get the ayin Rabbasai, to get the big ayin of the Shema Yisrael. That's where we talk about in the Shema Yisrael. That's when we talk about going out of Egypt. If you look in the Bible, you look in a Torah scroll, you'll see when it comes to this sentence, Shema Yisrael, it's a sentence in the beginning of Deuteronomy, in Parshas Eschanan. And it talks over there, it says Shema Yisrael. This is the saying of the Jewish people, right? Motto of the Jewish people. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. If you look over there, you'll see that the ayin is written in a big. That's ayin is the number 70. Every letter in Hebrew alphabet is also a number. So ayin is 70. So that's the big ayin, the number 70, which gives power to the 70 souls to go out of Egypt and affect and elevate the 70 nations. From this, move on, it's understood from this medrash that the Jewish people that the Jewish people should know that even when they are in exile, in addition to the fact that the Jewish people remain whole in completion, the Jewish people are still here. Like it says in that at the end of the Torah portion, Vayechi, it says V'yechantu oto v'yisam ba'aron Mitzrayim. It says that Yosef was put, he was embalmed and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Why did they embalm Yosef? They embalmed him that his body should remain whole. Hari Elu Shmos ben Israel. These are the names of the Jewish people that went into Egypt. This even adds even more. Not just Yosef came out whole, but also the future redemption. It's also mentioned here that the Jewish people also remain whole in their souls, in their bodies, in their physical life, in their spiritual life, all together. And neshama bari b'guf bari, a healthy body, soul, and a healthy body. Tachlit hashleimut, the ultimate completion. Right? The Jewish people have been through so much, and they've had so many enemies, and they've been cast out of so many nations. Here, just from the time the temple was destroyed until now, it's been almost 2,000 years, and we haven't had our own nation, we haven't had our own army, and we haven't had our own. We've been scattered all over the world, and nevertheless we've survived. Amazing, we've survived. And not only have we survived, we flourished. And not only have we flourished, but we've also given benefit to all the nations where we were, and all the nations that expelled us usually, right, just fell into nothingness. Take a look at Spain. Spain used to be the capital of the world, and they evicted the Jews. It took a little while. That's it. Portugal. Same thing. Evicted the Jews. What happened? Garnished. Nothing. Now where they are. What happened? Okay, there's probably exceptions also, but nevertheless, the Jews have definitely benefited wherever places they are. But they haven't benefited in the way that they're supposed to. The way they're supposed to benefit the world is to turn the whole world around to realize that God and His Torah are the way to serve, way to live a true life. And therefore, the Jewish people are ultimately complete. Lo rak shemovil geula, ela yeter mizeh matzav shel geulat Yisrael ad yemei That the Jewish people, the whole essence of the Jewish people is to bring to the days of the Mashiach. Now, just get this, I have to get this thing straight here. The days of the Mashiach doesn't mean the Mashiach is just a bunch of days. It's just this period, this eon, whatever it's called. What's it called? Eon, yeah. It's a, how do you say, it's just an occurrence that's going to happen. Mashiach is a human being. Mashiach is a person, just like King David. And this person, he's going to be in the future redemption. You can take all the Jews and force them to come back to the land of Israel. If there's not Mashiach, that's not the redemption. The temple won't be built. You can't build the temple without Mashiach. Can't be done. That's what the Rambam said. The only expert on the Jewish law of Mashiach is the Rambam, Maimonides. He's the only one. No, but there's no one else. Except recently, people stood up and said that whatever they wanted. They ignore the Rambam. But the fact of the matter is, the redemption of the Jewish people depends on this human being that's called the Mashiach. This Mashiach is going to be a direct relative of King David. Look in the Rambam, near the end of the Rambam, he explains what it's supposed to be. But the point of the Mashiach is that he's going to awaken in each one of us this same crazy force for good that the Mashiach himself embodies. And that's called redemption. Our piece, according to this, it's possible to understand also the connection of Parshat Shmot to Kaf Tevet, the 20th day of Tevet. What's the day of 20th day of Tevet? That is today, the day of the passing away of the Rambam, of the Maimonides. That it always comes right next to Parshat Shmot. One second. Yeah. That falls always right next to Shmot. Okay, the Rambam, especially according to the Rambam. What's a Rambam? What type of a name is that? Rabbi Moshe ben Mammon. That was his name. He's given the name Maimonides because his father's name was Maimon, so he's called Maimonides. There's also the Ramban. His name is Rav Moshe ben Nachman, so he's called Nachmanides. But his name is the short name is the Rambam. Okay, especially according to what's known that Shabbat, everything we eat on Shabbat comes from the preparation from before Shabbat. Like the rabbis say, whoever makes an effort and prepares before Shabbat will eat on Shabbat. So it's understood that there's a connection between the day of the passing away of the Rambam, which is right before Shabbat, especially this year, it's Friday, today, to the Torah portion, which that's what we eat on Shabbat, right? We eat spiritually the ideas that are found in Parshat Shmot. And even more, the Achila of Shabbat, this eating, so to speak, of Shabbat, comes by means of the avoda and the work and the effort that we put in before Shabbat, which that's the day of the passing away of the Rambam, Erev Shabbat. What was this Rambam? By the Rambam, by Rabbi Moses ben Maimon. Okay, now again, just to those people who don't know, he wrote a lot of books about Judaism. The main one, he wrote also a lot of letters to Jews that were very confused in his time. He lived like 800, 900 years ago. And he wrote letters explaining ideas about Mashiach, the raising of the dead. What is a Jew? There were Jews that were apostates. There were a lot of Jews that left Judaism because they were afraid of the Muslims. The Muslims forced them. Can they come back to Judaism? But mainly he wrote a 14-volume book, a 14-volume, what do you want to call it? An epic treatise, a book that's called the Yad HaChazaka. Yad is Yudalid, that explains all of the laws of Judaism, everything. Laws that are only relevant to the time of the temple. And finally, in the end, he talks about the laws of the Mashiach. It says that from Moses until the Rambam, there was never anyone that was like him, including all the prophets, including everybody. But the Rambam, we can see clearly how it is that he was in the state of Egypt. And how it is that the fact that he was in Egypt, I mean, the fact that he actually lived in Egypt, this caused and which was relevant to his time, the redemption of the Jewish people, whether a spiritual redemption, excuse me, compared to the darkness of the exile that was then, like going out of Egypt, or whether the power to prepare for the future redemption, simply, like it's hinted at, the Rambam is Rosh Tevis, Rabos, Movsei, Beretz Mitzrayim, a lot of miracles in the land of Egypt. In the land of Egypt. What was the Rambam? Listen, in the time the Rambam actually lived in Egypt, that's where he wrote a book, which is called Mishnah Torah. This is these 14 volumes of all the laws of Judaism. Laws of laws, gathering all of the laws of the Torah, the oral Torah, the Talmud, that this actually brought a redemption, Yetzias Mitzrayim, in the darkness of the exile. He made it possible for Jews that didn't have all of the, you have to remember that in those days, there was no printing presses. There was no printed books. Printing presses that were booked, that was like 500 years ago. And the Rambam was like 900 years ago. So there was no books that were printed. If you wanted a Talmud, you had to find somewhere or other someone that had it handwritten. And now, but not everybody had all the volumes of the Talmud. And even then, when you had the Talmud, there was no explanation to it. A person had to go and learn. Not everyone had that ability to learn. So the Rambam knew by heart the whole entire Talmud, and he took out all the laws because the whole Talmud is arguments, different opinions, and it's not clear a lot of times what the conclusion is. And sometimes there can be different conclusions and according to different ways of looking at the Talmud. And the Rambam, he consolidated it all into 14 books, all of the laws of the Talmud. I mean, there are people that disagree with certain laws that he has, but everything that he has is very firmly based. God wants there to be arguments in Judaism. In certain things, and one thing, though, that the Rambam writes that there's no argument. What he says, everybody agrees with, is what he wrote about Moshiach. Only in the last 90 years, there's people that made up their own ideas, but nobody ever disagreed with the Rambam, what he wrote about Moshiach. Like the Rambam writes in his beginning, the reason that he wrote this book was in order that he could remove the concealment and confusion that there was in the world regarding learning the Torah and the ideas of the Torah. And those explanations and laws and responsa that he had, they're relevant to our days also. I'm sorry, they're relevant to his day, and for people who don't understand things properly, only a little bit. So therefore, said that there are certain people that aren't able to read the Talmud. Therefore, said the Rambam, I saw it necessary to write clear laws, all of them in a clear language and in a short way, so that the whole entire oral Torah, in other words, the interpretation of the Torah, should be clear in everybody's mouth. Maybe now here's the point. Usually all the enemies of the Jewish people, they struck first of all at the oral Torah, at the Talmud, at the rabbis. The enemies of the Jews, that always what they tried to do was to make up their own explanation of what the Torah says. To discredit the rabbis, to hate the rabbis. Especially that's the case in Christianity. To hate the rabbis, despise the rabbis are lying to us, that they're bad people. But the fact of the matter is that that's totally not true. The Torah was given in order to be explained. The Torah as it is makes no sense. Even the 10 Commandments. We've talked about this before. Don't kill. Maybe it means don't kill bacteria. Maybe what is it? It doesn't explain what not to kill. Right? Don't steal. Maybe it means don't steal first base. Who knows what it means not to steal? So the Torah was purposely given in shorthand by God, so that rabbis would sit and learn. There's a commandment to learn the Torah. But the people would. That's not easy. So the Rambam wrote a book explaining exactly what the laws of the Torah are. This, of course, is according to his opinion, but he was such an amazing, pure, holy genius that his opinion is taken very, very seriously by everyone. And he's not the only genius that existed in the course of Judaism. But anyone who disagrees with the Rambam has to bring reasons why. That the book of the Rambam was made in order to show the Jewish people in all the generations, beginning with the Jewish people in Egypt in the generation of the Rambam, and from then there was laws spread out to every single generation, and also the Jewish people in all the generations afterwards, including also they added on many books to explain the Rambam, to disagree with the Rambam, to argue with the Rambam, and they're founded on all of them are founded on the book of the Rambam. In other words, that the Rambam caused that also in the situation that we're in nighttime, Aravim in Egypt, like it is in general, like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, we should say Shema Yisrael, even in the nighttime, when he was in Egypt, the Jewish people all spread around the world, and that nevertheless they should be going out of Egypt, Geulas Yisrael. If you read the history of the Rambam, is really, he was kicked out of here and kicked out of there. And when he went into Egypt, he was a doctor. He became the doctor of the Sultan. And this is this is something like before the Rambam, like a 1,000 years before the Rambam. It was Rabbeinu HaKodesh, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, that he says he could have been Moshiach of his generation. He wrote the Mishnayot. He was the one who began to write down the oral Torah, in order that the Torah Baal Peh, the oral Torah, should not be forgotten. The explanation of the Torah should not be forgotten by the Jews. Like it's hinted at in the first Mishnah that he wrote, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right? The Mishnah was something like what the Rambam wrote. The Rambam wrote a clarification, but the Mishnah was written it was written 1,000 years earlier, because the Jewish people were spread around the world. The temple had been destroyed, and people were starting to forget what the Torah meant. So Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, he wrote down all the explanations of the rabbis. And then afterwards, there was a further elucidation, explanation, that was the Talmud. And that's what boys learn in yeshiva, is the Talmud. Maskir in yeshiva, Yetziat Mitzrayim, that's what it means. Even more, in addition to the fact that we mentioned going out of Egypt in the nighttime, that's what Rambam did, that he made it possible for the Jews to go out of their ignorance and their darkness, even when they were in actual Egypt in the time of the Rambam. The Rambam also brought about the idea of all of the days of your life to bring the days of the Mashiach. Not only to enlighten his generation, but to enlighten all the generations and to actually bring Mashiach. Like it's known that the book of the Rambam also has all the laws of the Torah, also the laws which are relevant to the time of the temple, also the laws of the days of the Mashiach. That this refers to all the Jewish people, and it tells them all of the laws which are relevant to the days of the Mashiach. It talks about the 7 Noahide commandments, etc. What the whole world is going to do, how all the nations of the world will all leave all of their religions and they'll worship only the Creator who's creating them. So Rambam explained the whole thing, and he was the one who told us how the world is supposed to be. And he also, the Rambam, he lived, how old was the Rambam when he passed away? 70 years. That indicates by him that it was a completion. He was like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He said, I am like 70 years old. And he could bring about this going out of Egypt and everywhere in the world, like we said about Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. According to what we said before, that the day of the passing away of a tzaddik, that all of his deeds everything is all gathered up together, and everything that he's done comes into the world in order to help to save and benefit and bless the world. So we can understand that this day of Chav Teva, which is today, the day of the passing away of the Rambam, we can find revealed all of the deeds that he's done of the Rambam. When he wrote this book, the Mishnah Torah in the land of Egypt, and all the rest of the work that he did in the course of the 70 years that he was alive, Paul Yeshua's, the Rebbe said that if you look, you'll find that there was probably never a person more busy in the history of the world than the Rambam. He was the doctor for the king, and he had to serve the king all the time. He was writing these books, and he had to answer people's questions. But nevertheless, he did this all in order to show the Jewish people. The Mori Nevuchim also wrote the book, The Guide to the Perplexed, the Jewish people for all the generations afterwards. According to what's understood, that's the whole idea of that if a person that eats what we eat on Shabbos, namely the book of Exodus, the preparation for it comes from today, the day when the Rambam passed away. That's what prepares for the holiness of this coming Shabbat. The Rambam, that's what the Rambam prepared the course of the 70 years of his life. It's all found in a revealed way, and that he brought salvation into the world. On this Erev Shabbat, so it's understood that if so, it must be that if the whole idea of the Rambam was to bring the Mashiach, and that's only the preparation, so we can understand that this Shabbat for sure should bring about the salvation of the Jewish people and the whole world of Boim Mitzrayim, and even in exile, we can bring the going out of Egypt. Because the Rambam gave us power. The Rambam is the one that's preparing for the Shabbat. Today is the day of the passing away of the Rambam, which is the sum total of his life. What can we learn from this simply, and especially in our generation, in our time? It's already spoken many times that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Nasi, the leader of our generation, Nosaf al-Zeh, in addition to the fact that the previous Rebbe said, Kolo Kolo Kitzim, picture of the previous Rebbe, we've had this before. Oh. In addition to the fact that it says in the Talmud, Kolo Kolo Kitzim, that back then, it was like 1,000, who knows, 800 years ago, they said that the Mashiach is supposed to have come a long time ago, even back then. Kavar Asu B'nai Israel, the Jewish people already did tshuva. The previous Rebbe stressed it again. The Jewish people have already repented. There is a critical mass of Jewish people have already repented. The same will call everything is finished. Even the buttons have been shined up for the parade to welcome Mashiach. All we have to do, that God has to just open our eyes, that we should see the true redemption, that it's already here, that everyone is already at the table of Mashiach. And there's Leviathan and the Shor Bor and the wine. It said, from this we can understand that if we already were in Egypt 3,000 years ago, and these are the names of the Jewish people that went into Egypt, and they have given us the power to go out of Egypt. So we have to have already the going out of Egypt, the redemption of the Jewish people. If all this time Jewish people have been working to bring to draw down the future redemption into the exile, how much more so? Allah has come of a kama. After there's already been so many deeds, all of the generations, including what Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah said in his time. That was 1,800 years ago. And the Rambam said in his time, and all the tzaddikim of all the generations said in their time. Until now, our last generation, including the Rebbes of Chabad, that they're direct descendants from David, from the house of Yehuda, including what the previous Rebbe said in the 70 years that he was in the world. Previous Rebbe also passed away at the age of 70. So how much more so in our generation, in our time, after that we finished all of these, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. So we have a promise that was from the Torah, that it will be what? Kol Yamei Chayecha, that all of the days of our life will be to bring to the days of the Mashiach. Simply, what does it mean? That we don't need any sort of delay between all the days of our life, in other words, the exile, and the days of the Mashiach. And that we've already had this delay, thousands and thousands, hundreds of generations already. But now it should be that all of the days of our life, for every single Jew, physical life, a soul in the body, including simply that should include in them the days of the Mashiach without any delay. Mikiv insists that the Geula is supposed to come immediately. But Rega Zu, Zu. The future redemption can come 1 second, like a person waking up in the morning. Oh, suddenly comes to. Even in such situation of the nighttime, like it said, Kach Sharega Acharon Shal Galus Hanakuda Acharona the Galus Nasim Harega Rishon the Nakudas Rishon. So the last instant, I just wrote a story, it's a whole long story about a man that asked for to have a child, and the first Rebbe of Chabad he gave him a blessing, but he said the child is going to be blind. The child certainly was blind, but the Rebbe made a second blessing, a long story, and the child was able to see. Now, a person that's blind, he's blind, he can't see anything. All of a sudden he can see. It's a whole new world, a whole new dimension. And that's what it means that Mashiach will come. In 1 second, everyone will suddenly see. Immediately in this place, in this time, without any delay whatsoever. Not even, even if a person is already 70 years old, nevertheless, like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, or like 70 years old, each and every person, for each and every Jew, immediately, with the ultimate completion, says Reuven, Shimon went down into Egypt, Reuven and Shimon come out. The names that they went into Egypt with, those names were already power for the redemption. So they took the redemption into Egypt. That's what it means. All the days of your life and the days of the Mashiach, infinite life that's going to be there. Okay, what are we supposed to do actually? Actually means like this: the service of the Jewish people now has to be everything of every moment of your life has to be lahavi liamos Mashiach. That's all we should be interested in. To reveal already, immediately, actually, how it is that that we're in that the fact that we're in exile is really, in fact, redemption. And by means of this, that we prepare ourselves and we prepare others for this idea of going on of the days of the Mashiach, especially regarding this day, which is the day of the passing away of the Rambam. By means, though, how do we prepare? By means that we add on learning the book of the Rambam. The Rebbe said that as Hasidic Chabad, and he wanted to spread out to everyone, we should learn 3 chapters a day of the Rambam. That way you finish it every year. Or you can do 1 chapter, it finishes in 3 years, including by means of strengthening, learning the Rambam, all the Jewish people, 3 chapters a day or 1 chapter a day, or just learning the book of the commandments of the Rambam. He also has a Sefer Mitzvahs, which is much shorter. And especially the book of the Rambam itself, the laws in the Rambam itself, we should learn the laws of the Mashiach. You can look it up online. Look it up. The what is it? Laws of Kings, right? Laws of Kings Rambam. It'll give you the whole thing. Especially the last 2 chapters, chapter 11, 12, the last 2 chapters, the laws of Malachim, the laws of kings, in the end of Mishnah Torah. Look up Laws of Kings, chapter 11. It'll pop up. You'll see the whole thing. In addition to learning this, everybody should also try to influence other Jews around him, men, women, and children, in a way that you should stand up a lot of pupils, and you'll see that others will be affected, and they will affect others as well. May it be God's will that by means of just making resolutions, that it will be immediately, we'll get the big reward. What's the big reward? We make a resolution, we're going to do everything we can to bring Mashiach, especially learning the laws of the Mashiach and the Rambam, and learning the rest of the Rambam as well. That after that there already is a king, Melech Bebeis David, that's the Rebbe, that he learns Torah, and he works, and this is the language of the Rambam. There'll have to be a king from the house of King David, and he's learning Torah, and he's working at the commandments just like David did, and he'll convince all the Jewish people to go in the ways of the Torah, and he'll strengthen Judaism, and he'll fight the battles of God, which then it's almost certain this person is Mashiach. You can assume that this person is Mashiach. And then after that, immediately there will be certainly Mashiach. that he'll bring the third temple, he'll gather all the Jews together. By means of this, it'll be Hatzliach Bnei Beit HaMikdash, he'll build the holy temple in its place, he'll gather all the Jews together, he'll fix up the whole world to serve God together. Until finally the Rambam, how the last words of the Rambam is, the world will be filled with the awareness of God like water fills the ocean. The whole world will be aware of the Creator that's creating them. It's pretty good. And it's not that far away from us, not hard to believe. That is the end of the Dvar Malchut today. Let's just do the Yom Yom. The Middle Rebbe, the second Rebbe of Chabad, he said to someone in a private audience, if two Jews discuss a subject in serving God, or they study together, so it says we have two divine souls against one natural soul. And the Tanya explains in the second chapter, first and second chapter, that every Jew has two souls. One is a natural soul. We want to call it a spiritual soul. And then he has a godly soul. And the spiritual soul, this keeps him alive and gives him intellect and etc. And then the godly, but that makes him, how do you say, part of the world. And then there's a godly soul, which that arouses the godly part, the godly aspect of him. If you want to say a created soul and a creator soul. It says when two Jews sit and learn Torah, they discuss then the creator soul, the godly soul, is what is dominant. Which is not the case if people just are doing their own thing, then everybody is separate. There's no unification of souls. That's what the Torah does, unifies souls. Let's do tomorrow. How do we do this? There must be a place over here where we can. Oh, there it is. This is tomorrow, Shabbat. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak once met the previous Rebbe. He met a water carrier carrying full buckets of water, and he said that when you meet someone that's carrying water, or you meet water, there's a maxim, there's a saying of the Baal Shem Tov that you should say like this: when you meet water, one should say that the Baal Shem Tov says that it's a sign of blessing. Say these words. You meet someone carrying water, or you meet up with water, you say, when you see water, you should say that the Baal Shem Tov said that is a sign of blessing. Here in Israel, we have a lot of blessing. God, with God's help, it's been a lot of rain. Hope there'll be a lot more. God bless you all. Have a good day and a good Shabbat with Moshiach. Now we'll meet, God willing, on Sunday at 8:15 in the morning. Shabbat Shalom.
Can I ask you a question?